The sun dipped low in the sky, painting the village in hues of orange and gold. The air was thick with the hum of crickets and the soft chatter of neighbors returning home from the fields. But tonight, the village buzzed with an unusual tension. A strange rumor was spreading, one that whispered of misfortune and despair. In the heart of it all, Otieno limped along the dusty road, clad in filthy rags. His face, gaunt and hollow, carried a look of defeat, yet his eyes glinted with something dark. He was unrecognizable to many, save for his stooped walk that gave him away to the observant. "What happened to him?" an elder murmured. "Otieno was never like this. He was lazy, but now. Did you hear about Mwangi and Aking? They say they've lost everything," another voice chimed in. Unknown to the villagers, Otieno was at the center of it all. He had made a dark pact, a twisted attempt to rise above his peers. He smirked beneath the guise of his misery, with the charm in his pocket humming faintly with power. Soon, he whispered to himself as he passed by his old home. "Soon, I will be the only one left standing." But what Otieno didn't know was that his actions had set the wheels of fate in motion. Destiny would not let him succeed without a price, and it would come sooner than he thought. Otieno's mother had always been a pillar of strength. Widowed early, she had raised her son single-handedly, working tirelessly to ensure he never lacked food or shelter. But Otieno, now 20, had grown into a lazy young man who scorned hard work and sought shortcuts to success. Otieno, his mother called one evening, sitting on a wooden stool outside their hut. She had a pot of porridge simmering over the fire, the aroma wafting through the air. "Come sit with me." Reluctantly, Otieno joined her, his face sullen. "My son," she began, her voice soft but firm, "you are not a child anymore. A man must work to build his future. Do you think I have toiled this long so that you can waste your life under the shade of a tree?" Otieno sighed, avoiding her piercing gaze. "Mother, you worry too much. I will find my way." "But how?" "By stealing maize from Mwangi." "By borrowing money you never return?" she asked, her voice rising. "I'll go to the city," Otieno replied sharply. "There's no future for me here." His mother's heart sank. She had seen others leave for the city, only to return broken and defeated. "Otieno, listen to me," she said, her voice trembling. "The city is not kind to lazy men. If you don't change, you will lose everything, even there." Otieno scoffed and walked away, leaving his mother staring into the fire, tears glistening in her eyes. Otieno's laziness was no secret in the village. While others woke before dawn to till the fields or tend to livestock, he would sleep until the sun was high, only to spend the day wandering aimlessly. His peers had tried to include him in their work, but Otieno always found an excuse to shirk responsibility. One particularly dry season, when food was scarce, Otieno grew desperate. His mother had refused to feed him, hoping hunger would spur him to action. Instead, it drove him to a darker path. One moonlit night, Otieno crept to Mwangi's granary, his heart pounding. Mwangi was known for his diligence and had harvested enough to last the season. Otieno's stomach growled as he pried the wooden door open and grabbed a sack of maize. The next morning, Mwangi discovered the theft. Being a cautious man, he had already suspected someone might steal from him and had set a trap. When he found Otieno's footprint in the soft earth, he wasted no time. By midday, Otieno was dragged to the center of the village. The elders gathered, their faces grim. Mwangi confronted him, his voice shaking with anger. "Otieno, we work hard to feed our families. And this is what you do?" The villagers' disapproval was palpable. Some shouted insults, while others looked on with pity. Otieno's mother stood at the edge of the crowd, her face streaked with tears. "I'm sorry," Otieno mumbled, but his words carried no weight. The punishment was swift, a public beating meant to humiliate him and serve as a warning to others. That evening, Otieno nursed his bruises in silence. As shame consumed him, the bitter resolve formed in his heart. I will leave this village, he decided. I will go to the city and show them all. The city was nothing like the village. Otieno had expected bustling streets lined with wealth and opportunity, but instead, he was greeted by chaos. The air was thick with the smell of smoke and garbage, and the noise of blaring horns and shouting vendors was deafening. Otieno managed to find a cheap lodging and used the last of his savings to survive the first week. He secured a job as a messenger, but his laziness quickly got the better of him. I can't walk all this distance under the hot sun, he complained, skipping deliveries and sleeping instead. Within days, he was fired. Undeterred, he found work as a cleaner at a local market, but the early hours and menial tasks grated on his pride. After 2 weeks, he quit, convinced he was meant for something better. The weeks turned into months, and Otieno found himself drifting. Jobs became harder to find, and his reputation as an unreliable worker spread. Hunger gnawed at him, and the city, once full of promise, now felt like a cruel, unforgiving labyrinth. Sitting on a crowded street corner, watching others rush by with purpose, Otieno felt a pang of envy. They are no better than me, he thought bitterly. Why do they have so much while I have nothing? For the first time, Otieno considered returning to the village. But the thought of facing his mother and peers as a failure was unbearable. I will find a way, he muttered, clenching his fists. I will take what is mine. Desperation led Otieno down a dark path. One evening, as the city lights flickered against the night sky, he overheard 2 men talking about a witch who lived on the outskirts of town. She can do anything, one man whispered. She gave me a charm that brought my enemies to ruin. Otieno's ears perked up. He followed the men at a distance, learning the location of the witch's lair. The next day, he made his way to the edge of the city, where the buildings thinned and the air grew heavy with an unexplainable tension. He found the witch in a small, dilapidated hut, her eyes gleaming with a knowing light. I need power, Otieno said, his voice trembling but resolute. The witch studied him, her expression unreadable. What are you willing to give? She asked. Anything, he replied. The witch smiled and handed him a bundle of rags. Wear these and appear as a beggar. When your targets give you alms, their stars will dim and yours will brighten. But remember, greed comes with a price. Otieno snatched the charm, dismissing her warning. As he left, the witch's voice echoed behind him. Beware, Otieno. The stars you steal may burn you. But Otieno paid no heed. He was already planning his first target, his heart alight with dark anticipation. Otieno returned to the village with a cunning plan hidden beneath a facade of ambition. He carried himself with an air of importance, spreading the word that he had found a lucrative business opportunity in the city. To make this plan work, he needed money his mother had guarded carefully by holding on to their only parcel of land. One evening, he sat with her by the fire, his expression serious. Mother, he began, I've seen a chance to make us wealthy. The city is full of opportunities, and I've been offered one that can change our lives. But I need to sell the land. His mother's heart tightened. The land was all they had left of their late father's legacy. Otieno, she said cautiously, this land is our future. Without it, what will we return to if your business fails? It won't fail, Otieno pressed, his voice earnest. Mother, trust me. Do you think I would let us fall into ruin? I'll double what we have. I'll build you a house in the village and send money every month. Her instincts told her something was amiss, but she wanted to believe him. After hours of pleading and reassurance, she relented, though her hands trembled as she signed the papers to transfer the land. Otieno sold the land and pocketed the money, lying to his mother about investing it. With a satisfied smirk, he packed his belongings and returned to the city, ready to set his plan in motion. In the bustling city streets, Otieno donned his disguise, a ragged coat and tattered hat that transformed him into the perfect picture of a beggar. He scouted his first target, Mwangi, the hardworking peer whose wealth and success had always rankled him. Mwangi had built a thriving business selling produce to the city's restaurants. He was a respected figure, his reputation gleaming as brightly as the coins in his pocket. Otieno knew that if he could bring Mwangi down, the others would be easier to manipulate. For days, Otieno positioned himself outside Mwangi's warehouse, huddled in the shadows. When Mwangi finally emerged one evening, Otieno limped toward him, holding out a shaking hand. "Sir, please spare something for a starving man," he croaked, his voice trembling with faint desperation. Mwangi, always kind-hearted, paused. "Here," he said, dropping a few coins into Otieno's palm. As the coins touched the charm hidden in Otieno's pocket, a strange warmth spread through his body. He smiled inwardly, knowing the curse had begun its work. In the days that followed, Mwangi's fortunes inexplicably turned. His crops withered despite good weather, his workers quit without warning, and his contracts were cancelled. Within weeks, Mwangi's thriving business crumbled, forcing him to abandon the city and return to the village in shame. Back in the village, Otieno welcomed Mwangi with open arms. "The city is unforgiving," he said with faint sympathy. "You're better off here." Mwangi, too distraught to see through the charade, thanked Otieno, unaware that the man who consoled him was the architect of his misfortune. Emboldened by his success with Mwangi, Otieno moved swiftly to his next target. Aking, a childhood friend, had risen to prominence as a tailor, designing clothes for wealthy city clients. Her boutique was thriving, and her confidence shone brighter than ever. Otieno stationed himself outside her shop, blending into the throng of beggars that lined the busy street. He waited patiently, observing her movements and waiting for the perfect moment. One rainy afternoon, Aking stepped out to run an errand. Otieno shuffled toward her, his rags soaked and clinging to his frame. "Madam," he called out, his voice weak, "help a poor soul." Aking, startled by his appearance, hesitated for a moment before pulling out a small note from her purse. "Here," she said, handing it to him. As her fingers brushed the note, Otieno felt the charm's power surge. He beat back a smile as he thanked her profusely, watching as she disappeared into the rain. Within days, Aking's boutique began to falter. Orders were delayed, her suppliers defaulted, and clients began cancelling. The misfortunes piled up until she was forced to close her shop and return to the village, broken and disheartened. Otieno was waiting for her. "Aking," he said, his voice dripping with false pity. "The city is no place for honest people. Stay here and rebuild your life." Aking, like Mwangi before her, had no idea that Otieno was the cause of her downfall. Among the broken souls returning to the village, Aking was the first to seek solace in faith. Distraught over her misfortune, she confided in a city pastor. "I've worked so hard," she wept. "Why has everything fallen apart?" The pastor, a wise and prayerful man, listened intently. He prayed for guidance, seeking clarity on the source of her troubles. That night, he had a vision, a man cloaked in rags, collecting the stars of others and dimming their light. When he awoke, the pastor called Aking to him. "There is a man," he said, his voice grave. "He pretends to be a beggar, but he carries a curse. Have you encountered anyone like this?" Aking's eyes widened as she remembered the beggar outside her shop. "Yes," she whispered. "I gave him alms not long ago." The pastor nodded. "This man is the source of your troubles. But do not fear, we will bring his schemes to light. The pastor devised a plan to expose Otieno and break the curse. He gave a king a small coin blessed with prayers and anointed with oil. The next time you see this man, he instructed, give him this coin. It will reveal his true nature. Meanwhile, Otieno, unaware of the growing threat, prepared for his next target. He had grown confident, believing his charm to be invincible. Days later, he returned to the city, setting himself up outside another busy street. To his surprise, a king appeared, her face calm but resolute. "Madam," he called out, assuming his beggar persona. "Help a poor soul." A king approached him and placed the blessed coin in his palm. The moment it touched his skin, a blinding light erupted, and Otieno's disguise fell away. He stood there, exposed in his true form, his ragged clothes replaced by his familiar village attire. The charm in his pocket burned as it disintegrated, and Otieno fell to his knees, trembling. Around him, the people stopped and stared, murmuring in confusion and disbelief. The pastor stepped forward, his voice ringing with authority. "Otieno, your greed and jealousy have brought ruin to others. Today, your schemes end." Otieno looked up, his eyes wide with fear, as the pastor reached out a hand to deliver him from his self-inflicted curse. Otieno sat on the cold, hard ground, his heart pounding as the crowd surrounding him grew larger. Whispers of confusion turned into angry murmurs. The pastor's words hung in the air like thunder. "Today, your schemes end." A king stepped back, tears streaming down her face as realization dawned. "It was you," she murmured, her voice trembling. "You took everything from me." Otieno looked around wildly, searching for an escape. His charm was gone, the rags that once hid his face replaced by the clothes he had worn from the village. "I didn't mean to," he started, but the crowd was in no mood for excuses. Mwangi stepped forward, his expression a mix of anger and betrayal. "You begged for help, Otieno. And we helped you, thinking you were a man in need. But you turned our kindness into a weapon." The people began to close in, their shouts growing louder. "Thief! Betrayer!" The pastor raised his hand, silencing the mob. "Let him speak," he said calmly. Otieno, trembling and humiliated, took a deep breath. "I was desperate," he stammered. "You all succeeded while I failed. I thought if I could take what you had, your stars, I could finally rise above." "And where has it brought you?" the pastor asked, his gaze piercing. "Look at what you've lost. Your dignity, your peace, and the trust of those who cared for you. Was it worth it?" Otieno hung his head in shame. For the first time, he saw the depth of his wrongs, and a heavy weight settled on his chest. The pastor turned to the crowd. "Otieno has wronged many of you," he said. "But revenge will not heal the wounds he has caused. Instead, we must help him find redemption." The crowd hesitated. A king and Mwangi exchanged uncertain glances. Forgiveness seemed like a distant concept, but the pastor's words carried truth. "Otieno," the pastor continued, "if you are truly sorry, you must make amends. Will you commit to restoring what you have taken, no matter how long it takes?" "Yes," Otieno whispered. Then louder, "Yes. I'll do whatever it takes." The pastor nodded. "Then your first step is to return to the village. The charm may be gone, but the damage it caused remains. With faith and hard work, you can rebuild not just your life, but the lives of those you've harmed." Though hesitant, Mwangi and Akin agreed to give him a chance. "We will see," Mwangi said, his tone cautious. "But if you falter again, there will be no forgiveness." Otieno nodded, tears streaming down his face. For the first time in years, he felt the stirrings of hope, fragile but present. When Otieno returned to the village, word of his deeds had already spread. His mother, who had waited anxiously for his arrival, greeted him with a mix of relief and disappointment. "My son," she said, her voice heavy with sorrow. "I warned you about the city, but you wouldn't listen. Look at the pain you've caused, not just to others but to yourself." Otieno fell to his knees before her. "Mother, I was wrong. I thought I could take the easy way, but all I found was suffering. Please forgive me." His mother's eyes filled with tears as she reached down to lift him up. "You are my son, Otieno. I will always love you. But love does not erase the consequences of your actions. You must face them and make things right." Her words gave Otieno the strength to face the villagers. One by one, he approached those he had wronged, offering apologies and pledging to help rebuild what they had lost. It was not an easy task. Many turned away, unwilling to trust him again. But Otieno did not give up. Otieno began working tirelessly, starting with Mwangi and Eking. He offered to till Mwangi's fields, planting crops to replace the ones lost during his curse. The work was grueling, and Otieno often collapsed in exhaustion, but he refused to stop. For Eking, he became her apprentice, learning the art of tailoring and helping her rebuild her boutique. His hands, once idle, now stitched tirelessly, repairing clothes and crafting new designs. Though he fumbled at first, his determination earned him Eking's reluctant respect. Word of Otieno's efforts spread, and slowly, the villagers began to soften. They saw him sweating under the sun, his hands calloused and his face streaked with dirt. They saw his mother's pride returning as she watched her son transform. The pastor continued to guide him, reminding him to stay humble and seek forgiveness not just from others, but from himself. "Redemption is a journey, Otieno," he said. "And you are only at the beginning." Months turned into years, and Otieno's hard work began to bear fruit. Mwangi's fields flourished once more, their yields even greater than before. Eking's boutique reopened, drawing customers from far and wide. But the greatest transformation was in Otieno himself. He had become a symbol of resilience and redemption, a man who had faced his darkest self and emerged stronger. One evening, the villagers gathered to celebrate the harvest, a tradition that had been absent for years. Mwangi and Eking stood at the center, smiling as they watched Otieno lead the preparations. As the celebration began, Mwangi raised a cup. To Otieno, he said, his voice firm. "He wronged us, yes, but he has worked harder than anyone to make things right. Tonight, we forgive him fully." The crowd erupted in cheers, and Otieno, overwhelmed with emotion, bowed his head. For the first time in a long time, he felt the warmth of acceptance and the lightness of a heart free from guilt. As the stars twinkled above, Otieno smiled, realizing the truth his mother and the pastor had tried to teach him all along: the greatest stars were not stolen but earned through honesty, hard work, and love. Did you enjoy the tale? Please like and share the video, drop your comment down below, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Turn on the notification bell for more enchanting tales like this one. Thanks for watching, and see you on the next amazing tale.